Brendan Swanson had been driving for hours, and he was lost. When he finally came across a house in the distance, he got excited because it meant that he could use his cell phone to call for help. But when he got close enough to see the details of the house, he realized that this wasn't any ordinary house, and soon after, he wished he'd never come across it. It all started when Brendan Swanson set out from Minneapolis, Minnesota, to visit some friends in Alexandria. He was only going to be gone for the weekend, so he didn't think much of it. But when he arrived at his destination, he found out that his friends weren't going to be available until late Saturday evening, so he decided to go back home. The drive would take him through a remote area with hardly any streetlights, but he knew the road well enough, and the trip should be uneventful. However, just before 8 p.m., everything changed. Brandon's car ran out of gas. Luckily, there was a gas station only half a mile away, so he left the car on the side of the road and walked over. But when he arrived at the gas station, he noticed that it was closed, so he turned around and continued walking. And that was when he saw a house in the distance, which looked like it might have been abandoned. But it was too dark to tell for sure. He wanted to get closer, but then he remembered his cell phone battery was dying. So he took a few steps back, turned his phone towards the house, and pressed the call button. As he watched, the signal bars began to fill up, letting him know that he'd be able to make a call. But as he waited for the call to connect, he realized something. The house in front of him didn't look abandoned at all. It was a nice two-story building with a porch and rocking chairs. There were even curtains in the windows. Suddenly he heard a loud bang, and someone shouted, "Get away!" He quickly hung up and ran to the nearest bush, hiding behind it as best he could. Seconds later, the porch light went off, and he heard heavy footsteps near where he was hiding. Then he saw a pair of bright headlights coming closer. Startled, Brandon stood up and waved his arms, hoping to attract the attention of whoever was passing by. When the car finally stopped, a man got out and asked if Brandon needed any help. Relieved, Brandon explained what had happened, and the stranger told him not to worry, he'd drive him back to the gas station. But as they approached the car, another loud bang made them both jump. "What was that?" Brandon asked. The man replied that it must have been a backfire, then got into his car and told Brandon to do the same. But when Brandon opened the door, he noticed something strange. The interior of the car was completely dark, like there wasn't any electricity. Even more alarming, there was a strange smell inside the vehicle, as though the upholstery had been soaked in gasoline. Brandon hesitated, but he didn't want to spend the night on the side of the road, so he got in and they drove off. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then Brandon asked, "So, do you live around here?" "Yep," the man replied. "Just moved in a few months ago." He didn't ask Brandon where he was headed, and that bothered him. Usually, people offered to drive others to their destination, but this guy seemed more interested in getting back to his house. Brandon kept quiet, but he couldn't help but notice that the route they were taking was very different from the one he'd been on before. They were driving on narrow dirt roads instead of the main highway, and it felt as though they were in the middle of nowhere. Suddenly, the driver slammed on the brakes and pulled over to the side of the road. "What are you doing?" Brandon asked. "We need to switch cars," the man replied. "Why?" "Because mine is being repossessed tomorrow," the man said, "and yours looks newer than mine, so if you don't mind, I'll take yours." Brandon refused, saying that he needed his car to get home. The man got angry, slamming his fist on the dashboard. "Listen, kid," he said, "I'm only trying to help you. If you want to go home, you're gonna have to switch cars with me." Brandon knew he was in trouble, but he tried to remain calm. Just as he was about to refuse again, the man said something that surprised him. "Of course you can keep your car. All I need is a ride to the end of the driveway." Brandon agreed immediately, and the man got out. But when Brandon turned the car around, he noticed something strange. They were still on a dirt road with nothing but trees surrounding them. He couldn't see any houses or street lights. In fact, it looked exactly the same as it had before. Confused, he got out and asked the man, "Where do you live?" The man pointed to a house in the distance and replied, "Right there." Brandon couldn't believe what he was hearing. He'd been driving for hours, and they were still in the middle of nowhere. Brandon got back into the car and continued driving. After a while, the man told him to pull over again, and when he did, he got out and said, "Thanks for the ride, son. You've been a big help." Then he started walking towards the house. But Brandon couldn't help but notice that the man hadn't thanked him for giving him a ride. Instead, he'd said he was giving Brandon a ride. Brandon's heart started to race as he realized what the man had been planning all along. This wasn't an ordinary house, and the man wasn't offering to help. He had sinister plans for Brandon. He slammed the car into gear and raced away. As he drove, he could hear the man shouting and banging on his car, but he didn't stop. He kept driving until he finally saw the faint lights of civilization in the distance. When he arrived at the gas station, he quickly filled up his car and drove home. Back at the house, Brandon called the police and told them about his encounter with the stranger. He described the man and the house, hoping that they'd be able to find it. But when the officers arrived at the address he'd given them, they found no trace of the man or the house. Brandon insisted that they'd found the wrong place, but they checked the area and confirmed that there was nothing there. As days turned into weeks, the case grew colder and colder. Brandon Swanson was never able to forget what had happened to him, and he'd never get over the fear that he'd never see his friends or family again. Some people may wonder why Brandon didn't call the police when he first saw the house. After all, he'd had his phone, and he knew that the man inside wasn't friendly. But the truth is that Brandon was afraid. The man had already made it clear that he was dangerous, and calling the cops would only make things worse. Besides, Brandon was smart enough to know that if the man was watching him, he wouldn't hesitate to strike, so he decided to play along, hoping that the man would eventually let his guard down. Unfortunately for Brandon, that never happened. This case remains unsolved to this day, and the mystery of the house in the middle of nowhere continues to baffle investigators. What do you think really happened to Brandon? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And remember to subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching.